So we're talking about healthy nutrition for toddlers tonight. I'll preface by saying that I have two kids of my own, almost 1 and 3, so I'm kind of in the heart of this myself. Most of what we're talking about tonight is generally what pediatricians are agreeing upon across the board, so it's not just my personal advice. And I try and stick to it myself. Some days are easier than others, so just be patient with the process. So our goals for tonight, first of all, we'll just give an overview of some of the nutritional requirements for kids around 1 to 4 years of age. We're also going to discuss some of the common concerns that I hear about in the office and some of the concerns that I have had as a parent myself. And then really, nutrition for your small child is really common sense, and that's really what we'll talk about tonight, is just a common sense approach to finding good foods for your kids to eat. And hopefully this is helping you promote lifelong healthy eating habits for your kid. So what I would like to start with is around 1 year of age, or I always prep parents for anticipating a shift in your child's diet around 1 year of age. So before 1 year of age, nutrition really is about that breast milk or formula. And we introduce solid foods around 6 months of age, and the purpose of that is really to help your child learn how to eat. But by 12 months of age, hopefully they've got all those skills and the appetite for solid foods, that nutrition is really going to be about solid foods and not about milk. So we transition from formula or breast milk to cow's milk, whole milk from 1 to 2 years of age. If you are breastfeeding, it's totally fine to use that as your breast milk if you want to continue. And it's really up to mom and baby when breastfeeding stops. But otherwise, it's really going to be about food. And be patient with it. So the voracious appetite that your infant might have had sometimes plateaus. If you look at growth curves for kids, they really have a pretty steep incline until about 15 months of age, and then things kind of slow down. And so parents sometimes get thrown off because their kid's not eating as much as they used to, or as much as they would expect for how much bigger they are. So be patient with that. Routines change as kids are growing, and again, schedules change. So it's kind of got its challenges there. After 2 years of age, or by 2 years of age, kids really should be eating what everybody else at the table is eating, and even before 2 years of age, that's ideal. There might have to be some modifications for safety, or as far as choking or preparation, and then of course quantity. They're not going to eat what the 8-year-old brother's eating. And then after 2 years of age, kids can really be drinking low-fat milk, so the whole milk benefit really isn't there after 2 years of age. So that's another way that they can be streamlined to the rest of the family's diet. Toddlers are challenging. Every age group presents its own challenges, but toddlers are growing quickly, or they're developing quickly. They're getting lots of new skills, and they want to demonstrate those skills. They want to have as much independence and control of their environment as possible, and so sometimes that lends itself to some extra struggles at the dinner table. So some basic ground rules that I would kind of lay on the table to start with is it's important to have some structure and expectations around mealtime, but you don't have to be nose to the grindstone about any of it. And keep in mind that kids in this age group are really fueled by attention. I think next week the topic is the terrible twos, or in the next couple of weeks or something like that. And really that's something to keep in mind, is that everything that gets them attention, they're going to do more of. So try and acknowledge the good behaviors that they're doing at the dinner table, and minimize your response to some of those negative behaviors. And trying to keep the meal time as positive as possible to help promote better eating in your kids. This slide is a little bit counterintuitive, but this is really the basis of it. And it's different than how I grew up, which was, you clean your plate, or this is really more so that, parents decide when the kid's going to eat. They decide what the food is that's going to be available, and how much of the certain foods they're going to make available to the child. But really it's up to the child to decide which of those foods they're going to eat and how much of each of those foods they're going to eat. And the only caveat I'd say to that is that, you know, if you put out chicken, potatoes, and strawberries, and they only want to eat the chicken, well, maybe before they get more and more chicken, they got to try some of the other things. But aside from that, you kind of have, or they get to decide how much to a certain extent. So again, your role as a parent is to choose what food is available and when it's available. This age group loves routine, and so being predictable, you know, not every day is going to go the same, and it's okay to break out of your routine. You don't have to do the same thing every single day, but if meal times are kind of have a rhythm to them, or your day-to-day has a rhythm to them, kids usually adjust to that better. So kind of expect 3 meals a day plus or minus 1 to 3 snacks or 1 to 2 snacks. I think it's important, sometimes snacks turn into grazing, and that is something worth avoiding. So if you know your child needs a snack in between meals, sit down, have the snack, a healthy snack ideally, and don't let it turn into the little snack container follows them around all day, and they're getting, because what tends to happen is they get a lot of nutrition from their snack food, and then mealtime comes around, the appetite's not really there, and then they lose out on some of the nutrition that might have been happening there. Again, create as positive of a mealtime environment as possible, and try and stay positive about the good behaviors your child's demonstrating at the table, and minimizing the bad behaviors. And model the behaviors that you want your child to learn. So if your routine right now is eating in front of the TV, then expect that that's going to be what your child wants to do. So kind of decide as a family how you want meals to go, and model the behaviors that you'd like to see in your child, and be mindful of what you're doing at the table too. Mealtime really is an opportunity for a lot of learning. Kids, again, are learning and developing all these new skills. So they're mastering their skills at eating, using utensils, getting better fine motor control. They're also learning a lot of social skills. This is where kids can learn a lot of manners, please, thank you, even some conversation skills for those older toddlers. So, and it's a good time to spend together as a family. There's a lot of research that has shown that families that eat together tend to have better nutrition overall. So sit down at the table and eat together. Talk about your day kind of stuff, and even your 2- and 3-year-old is going to have something to say. And then going back to what the kid gets to decide, they get to decide of the foods that you offered how much they're going to consume of them. And this approach is really to help kids self-regulate a little bit more. So there's been some research that shows that when you do the clean your plate kind of attitude, kids will end up eating when they're not really hungry, and then it starts diminishing their body's response and satiety, or feeling of fullness. And so kids, you know, some days they're going to be rock stars and eat everything you put in front of them, and some days they're just not going to be that interested. And it's okay. They know, and they can regulate this themselves. So again, just leave it up to them how much they eat at any given meal. If one meal is just seems like a failure, don't feel like you have to go find the peanut butter and jelly or something like that to make sure that they're full. Just try again the next meal. So we'll also talk about some healthy food choices. The FDA has had the food pyramid. I think that's what it was stressed when I was growing up. They've kind of shifted to a food plate. I don't think you have to get too hung up about any of that. You know, these are kind of the basic food groups I would generalize. And the way I think of it is fruits and vegetables. I put them at the top because I think they're the hardest to do and the most important to do. And in your head, if half your child's plate and half your child or your own plate is fruits and vegetables, that's a good start. That's really something to shoot for. I kind of think of protein and dairy together, because dairy is a source of protein. And I think the trick about those two is portion size, knowing how much is an appropriate amount for your child and for yourself. And then grains are easy. The grains are everywhere. So what we'll talk about with grains is how to identify healthier grains to give your child. And then oils and fats aren't really a food group, but they find their way into our diet and helping decide healthier ways to prepare our food and healthier fats to use when we're cooking. So to start with fruits, according to the FDA or the food pyramid or the food plate, any fruit or 100% fruit juice counts as part of the fruit group. I hesitate with that. Juice is not my favorite, and I think most pediatricians would back that up. So technically, the rule out there is no more than 4 to 6 ounces for your toddler. I think if your kid never has juice, that's totally fine, and that would be something I'd strive for as a parent. I try and use it as a treat, and so much so that if the kid doesn't even really have a taste for it, that's great. Juice is just a processed form of the fruits. There's a lot more nutrition if they actually ate the fruit, and that's why I say shoot for the fruit rather than the juice if you can. But you can find fruit in a variety of ways and prepare it in a variety of ways. Fresh, canned, frozen, dried, mashed up or pureed in a smoothie or eaten it whole. Kids like variety, and there's a variety of ways to find fruits and get fruits into their diet. How much fruit a child or a toddler should be eating? Probably about a cup a day. So what qualifies as a cup? 1 large banana right there, you'd be done for the day. I don't think you have to stop there. If your kid loves bananas, try other fruits too. 8 large strawberries would count as a whole day's worth of fruit. 32 grapes, a medium apple, pear, orange, or half a cup of dried fruit counts as a whole cup. So again, you don't have to decide on a fruit of the day, but again, portion size for a toddler isn't as big as you might think, and try and do a variety of them as much as possible. Vegetables is a very similar story as fruits. So again, vegetable juice counts. I think the vegetable juice that everybody would think of is maybe like V8. The original V8 is probably better over the V8 Splash or Fusion, because those are a little more processed and the fiber's not there. And I think that's kind of what I always think of as, or that's a good way to decide if there's enough nutrition there, is if there's fiber to go with the sugar calories that you're getting. So vegetable juice is probably preferable over fruit juice, but again, it's juice. It'd be better if they were eating the vegetable. And again, you can provide it in a variety of ways and forms. So preparing it raw, cooked, fresh, frozen, canned, whole, cut up, mashed, whatever your recipes find, or whatever works for your family. A cup of vegetables a day would be about where you're shooting for on average. Medium potato or sweet potato counts as a whole serving or a whole day's worth. 2 cups of raw leafy greens, 2 medium carrots. I don't think these are some of the best vegetable examples, to be honest, because I don't think potatoes are my favorite. I always kind of think of potatoes in the grains, not that they're a grain, but they just have a lot of carbs to them. And then leafy greens are, some kids love lettuce, some kids aren't going to touch it. So that, but you keep trying and keep offering it. So any vegetable is good though. As far as grains, so there's really, grains come in different forms. There's whole grains and there's refined grains. So whole grains, when you are shopping in the grocery store, if it is advertising that it's whole grain, I believe that all it really has to be is 51% whole grain, and the rest can be refined grains. And you want to shoot for at least half of your grains being whole grain. So refined means that it's been milled and processed, and in that milling, processing, they lose some of the fiber. Food companies like that because it improves shelf life, and it gives a smoother texture to the foods that they're making. But you lose, again, the fiber, you lose vitamin, or the B vitamins like thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, that kind of thing. Enriched means they've added back in those B vitamins, but it doesn't add back in the fiber. So again, the ideal would be a whole grain. and then a step up from, or a step down from that would be enriched, and then straight, like white bread is truly the most refined version of grains. So picking the better grain, try for the 100% whole wheat bread if you can do it, and that's the guarantee that it is more than that 51% whole grain. Trying for brown rice over white rice. Cornmeal is one that I personally haven't ventured towards, but if you're ambitious, go for it. So degermed cornmeal means that they took the corn, or the outer layer of the corn, off, and that's basically what most people buy when they're buying cornmeal. But you lose some extra fiber and extra nutrients that way. If you decide to go the route of whole cornmeal, it will change your recipes. Just know that it takes longer to cook. It might have a little different flavor, so you might have to pay attention to that. But go for it. If you are a mom searching for new recipes, try finding recipes that use whole wheat flour or the whole cornmeal, and that's a good way to get some extra fiber and nutrition in as well. Oatmeal is a great toddler breakfast. Oatmeal with some fruit added in is great. Good source of fiber and good nutrition there. Proteins, I think it's easy, as Americans like to think meat and poultry, but it involves a lot more, so you don't have to be stuck there. Sometimes parents get worked up because their kids don't like meat, but you can get protein from a lot of other sources, including dairy, which isn't listed here, but dairy has protein as well. So seafood, beans, peas, legumes, eggs, soy, nuts, and seeds are all good sources of protein. And a variety, if you're sampling from all of those, then that just increases the nutrition that you're providing. When you are picking meats, try and do the low-fat cuts of beef. Be mindful that, again, processed meat, most processed food has more salt than non-processed food, and meat is especially true. So hot dogs and lunch meat, just a lot of extra sodium in those things. Not that they're off the table, but just keep that in mind. So appropriate portion for your toddler, an ounce, basically 2 ounces a day of meat or a protein equivalent is good. What qualifies is maybe not as much as parents sometimes think, so you don't have to get overly anxious about how much protein they're getting. So 1/4 cup of cooked beans counts as protein, an egg, a tablespoon of peanut butter, or 1/2 ounce of nuts or seeds, so they count a little higher. So there's good ways to sneak some protein in there. Again, dairy counts as a protein as well, so we'll talk about that a little bit more. Dairy seems like it's an all or none thing, so we'll talk about both sides of that. But dairy isn't absolutely necessary. All the nutrition that you're getting from the dairy food group you can get someplace else, but it tends to be an easy way to get some of that nutrition. So the big things that having dairy in your diet provides you is protein, calcium, vitamin A, and vitamin D. And when you're picking out dairy products, it's the calcium content that matters, and usually it's the dairy products that are lower fat that are going to be the ones that count towards this. So like butter and cream cheese, they're high fat dairy products, probably not actually counting towards your dairy food group, more like yogurt, cottage cheese, and milk. So how much dairy? The sweet spot for dairy would be 2 to 3 servings a day. And what qualifies as a serving is 8 ounces of milk, a cup of yogurt, 2 cups of cottage cheese, or 2 slices of hard cheese, those kinds of things. Cheeses, I always am a little bit hesitant about as a pediatrician. We see a lot of constipation these days, so be mindful of that. Don't use cheese as your primary source of dairy, I would say. And then if your kid isn't a milk drinker, so if they were really good at all these other things, then I would say they don't need the milk. So sources of calcium would be broccoli, the dark leafy vegetables, soybeans, almonds, or orange juice. A lot of them are fortified with vitamin D and calcium, but I'm not real excited about giving your kid an extra juice to get them that. Tofu and some cereals may have good volumes of that, but I generally say that most kids are not likely to eat these things in the appropriate quantities to get calcium, so milk is probably your best option there. And then same thing for vitamin D. The main way we used to get vitamin D back hundreds and thousands of years ago was through sunlight. Now no one should nor does get that much sun exposure, so we have to supplement it into our diet, and milk is the primary way to do that. Again, orange juices and cereals may have it, but maybe not up to the quantity necessary for you or your kids. And then vitamin A is the other thing, and dark green leafy vegetables, eggs, and liver. Maybe your kid's not eating quite enough of those things to qualify. So what I generally say, and your pediatrician may say something different, but if your kid's doing 2 glasses of milk a day, they're getting enough of all that stuff, you're fine. If they're really not a milk drinker, then maybe that's the kid I'd consider a multivitamin in. Otherwise, generally, I don't think kids really need multivitamins if they have a good, well-rounded diet. What sometimes happens is you get the milkaholic, so they are stuck in their baby ways of drinking milk all the time, and sometimes we'll get toddlers coming in drinking 40 plus ounces a day. And the most concerning thing with this is iron deficiency anemia, and kids can get hospitalized from that, to be honest, but that's usually those kids that are just drinking milk and not really eating anything else. Excessive milk can cause constipation because milk proteins can be constipating. Excessive milk also decreases the appetite because they're satisfied by the milk, but then they didn't get all the nutrition that they would have from a nice varied diet. And then you might have compromised weight gain or growth. So really the goal should be 16, 20 ounces, 24 ounces max. Oils and fats. So the reason we talk about this is just helping you be mindful of healthy ways to prepare your fruits and vegetables and meals. Oils are fats, but oils are the unsaturated fats, so they tend to be liquid at room temperature. Oils tend to come from plants or fish. Saturated fats are the ones that tend to come from animals and are solid at room temperature, so like butter, lard, bacon grease, animal fat, that kind of thing. So it's not really a food group, but fats do provide essential fatty acids, so they're going to find their way into the diet, but again, you just want to make sure you're picking the healthier versions. Some foods that have high levels of oil but are healthy are nuts, olives, avocados, and fish. And avocados is one of my favorites for a toddler diet because it's easy and no choking risk. As a pediatrician, I'm always baffled by some of the things that parents really think. So fruit snacks is not a fruit. They should be a treat. The dentists hate these kind of things. Gummies is just the worst case scenario for the teeth. Even if they're made of 100% juice, again, I personally would not count it and go for the fruit. If you do a fruit snack, again, it should be considered like a cookie in my book. So be cautious of those. Cereals is another thing that I always caution parents on. So I went to a speaker one time and they said, and they tried to, motivate us to look at your fiber content in your cereal to your sugar content. So if you look at kids cereals like Captain Crunch and Lucky Charms and all those, the sugar ratio, it might be like 12 grams of sugar per 1 gram of fiber. And, really you want to be going for a 1-to-1 ratio. So like Raisin Bran or even like Frosted Mini Wheats or something like that, they can have a lot of sugar. So it's just something to be mindful of when you're looking at your cereal selection. Look at the label and see what is really in there and what nutrition is really provided. A lot of cereals will say, 11 essential vitamins and nutrients or whatever, but generally anything your child's going to eat is going to meet some of those same things. So try and look at the fiber part too. Toaster pastries really are marketed to kids, not a lot of nutrition there. Fruit and granola bars, it's another thing you kind of have to just look at your label and see how much nutrition are we really getting for all the calories that might be in this. Yogurt has always been considered this healthy food, and people have or companies have latched onto that and they've made it tastier and slowly snuck more and more sugar into it. So when you're picking out which yogurt you're going to buy your kid, it might be worth looking at how much sugar is in it. I personally wish I would have started my kids on just plain yogurt and mixed fruit in, and it's hard to get them to go back that direction. Puffs are fine. I think I kind of look at them as more of a food to learn a skill rather than any source of nutrition. There's not a lot of fiber there. There's not a lot of calories there either, but don't let them fill up on puffs. The other thing that I didn't put on here is the little goldfish crackers, and I think they really, and the like, not just them, but they really make you think that there's something good about them, and they're kind of like this staple toddler food. But they have a lot of salt, they have a lot of fat, and again, for the calories that you're getting, what nutrition are you getting? So just be mindful of those things in moderation. As a pediatrician, we'd be wrong to not talk about choking with kids in this age group. So I believe about 40% of choking related fatalities in children are related to food. So just be mindful of what you're putting in front of them and how well they're going to handle it. Hard candy is at the top of the list, so keep that in mind when you're doing your Halloween candy shopping. Other things, so nuts, popcorn, and chips. I've had people tell, or instructors told me in my training, if they can't spell it, then they can't have it. I'm not totally sure it has to be that ridiculous, but maybe somewhere along those lines. Popcorn is one that people always think, really, popcorn? But most people, if you're like me, like eat it by the handfuls, and your kid does that, they get a hard kernel, it can be a bad situation. So popcorn really is a choking hazard. Tough meat, round things like grapes or cherry tomatoes, those kinds of things with a hard casing on the outside can be a perfect choking hazard. So be cautious of those things. And then some raw fruits and vegetables your kid might not be ready for. So ways to prevent choking: sit at the table to eat. Eating on the go is a risk. Try and avoid distractions like the television or children playing in the same room. Try not to eat in the car if you don't need to. And try and be present when your toddler is eating. Ideally, you're sitting at the table with them. If you're not eating with them for some reason that night, try not to be in the bathroom getting ready or to go out or whatever. Try and be there with them while they're eating. And then those problem foods like hot dogs or cherry tomatoes or whatever, cut them appropriately. Cutting meats up across the grain, quartering the round fruits and vegetables. And then hot dogs just slicing along isn't quite ideal. Slice along the lengthwise too. Vegetables like carrots, that's the one that always comes to mind. Maybe cook it a little bit so it's a little bit softer, grate them or cut them into little matchstick size pieces, that kind of thing, to prevent the choking risk. Peanut butter is another thing that people are like, what? But it's if it's spread too thickly, sometimes it can kind of catch the kid off guard. Changing gears a little bit, supplementing nutrition. There's a lot of different nutritional supplements out there, and sometimes they're indicated, but I would generally say do not get excited about like a Boost or a Carnation Good Start or something like that without talking to your, or Pediasure, that's the other, not to name names, anyways. Probably don't need to give those to your kids unless your doctor is talking to you about that. A nice variety in your kids' diet, they're getting everything they need. And I see a lot of kids that have these really restricted diets. They only like chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese, and so mom supplements with Pediasure, and it's just high calorie after high calorie on top of Pediasure. So really want to work on a well-rounded diet and talk to your doctor if you think that's something you need. I feel like the marketing there is kind of getting vulnerable parents that are a little bit anxious, and it's not totally fair. So some tips on getting kids to like fruits and vegetables. Developmentally, it's totally normal for your kid to be reluctant to try something new. So it may take more than one chance to. So give it a chance, give it 8 to 10 chances. Sometimes that's how many times a kid has to be exposed to a food to say, okay, I'll put this in my mouth and I'll try it. So you don't have to coerce them. If actually research is showing that kids that are coerced to eat food or kind of bribed to eat their food tend to have poor nutrition overall and a higher BMI or a higher risk of obesity. So you don't have to coerce them to try this new food. Just put it there, let them play with it. It's okay for them to touch it, smell it, figure out what this thing's all about. And if they don't even have any of it that meal, that's fine. And just keep preparing it as you would any other time. I think a good example would be broccoli. The first time you have broccoli, doesn't smell good, looks pretty weird. It might take a few times to see this thing before you're ready to pop it in your mouth. Set a good example. I myself was a picky eater growing up. I do not like fresh tomatoes, but my kids don't know that, and I don't plan on them finding that out. If tomatoes is part of the meal, I have a small amount. I don't make a deal of it, and I think that's a good thing to do. Don't advertise your own picky eating, so they don't want to grow up and be like you. So variety is the spice of life, and again, kids like routine. They tend to take food jags, so they might get fixated on this 1 or 2 foods, and that's all they want. Be patient with it. Don't cater to it. Don't feel like you have to make it just to make sure that they eat. Just offer the food that you think that they should eat, and if they don't eat, don't get too worked up about it. So ways to keep a variety. Try new vegetables. Keep some frozen vegetables in the freezer or something like that, so you always have something on hand. There's going to be those pizza nights and macaroni and cheese nights, but then if you got something in your freezer or some canned vegetables, you can kind of supplement a little bit, so you keep some variety in there. Buying fresh and in-season fruits and vegetables tends to help your price and as well as the flavor, so that's a good thing to try and do. And then don't be afraid to play with your food a little bit. So, putting fruit faces on a pancake or something like that. Kids love that kind of thing, and it makes it more fun and interesting. And it might make them just a little more likely to put that fruit in their mouth. Kids love to dip, and it's pretty ridiculous what kids will dip. I have a little boy that he puts his grapes and mustard, whatever, that's fine. So some good dip options might be hummus, yogurt, or salsa. Also keep in mind some of the picky eating that toddlers might demonstrate is they don't want foods to touch. So if you're having a hard time getting that casserole or hot dish to go over, that might be part of it. And try and get your kid involved. Even a 2-year-old is going to be excited, and they're trying to be like you, so they're going to want to help in the kitchen. Let them go shopping with you, pick out a new vegetable to try, let them decide on the dinner vegetable. If their tendency is to pick corn every single night, say, how about cauliflower or broccoli? Give them a choice between 2 things, and that's a general rule that I use for all toddlers is they love to have a choice, so sometimes it just has to be a choice between these 2 things. And then try and involve the kids in preparing them. So some kitchen activities that a toddler might be capable of doing, and it may not actually be helpful, but they feel a lot of pride in themselves if they get to help. So wiping the table, putting away some groceries, throwing away some of the trash, tearing up lettuce or green beans if they're a little bit older, stirring the batter, assembling a pizza, those are all good things. Maybe have some old dishes that they can set the table with, that kind of thing. Kids that help in the kitchen, there's research out there for this, but they tend to try and like more foods. They have a little more confidence, and they take a lot of pride in it. Our son will take the peels of a pineapple one by one to the garbage, and he thinks it's the greatest thing. So it doesn't take much for them to feel like they're contributing. Kids that help in the kitchen learn some math and science concepts a little bit earlier maybe. It's a chance for them to learn some new vocabulary, develop some skills if they're mixing or something like that, and learn some responsibility as far as we clean up after we do these things. So eating healthy as a family is really helpful. You know, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but kids are learning a lot of skills, and they're learning a lot of social cues. So, you know, sitting down and eating a meal as a family, they're going to learn what's appropriate portions, what's appropriate foods for a meal, that kind of thing. And this is, again, your chance to be a role model, even if you're not perfect yourself, just try. Turn the TV off, turn the TV off, turn the TV off. Really, if you have a kid less than 2 in your house, ideally the TV's not on at all. That's the ideal. And then I think it's fair to keep some expectation of them sitting at the table for a certain amount of time, whether or not they choose to be eating. If they're going to be a distraction or a frustration, it's okay to just let them play in the room. But you know, I think it's good to have a little expectation that we're going to sit down and eat, and then if it doesn't go well, it's okay to just let them get down and be around so you can still supervise while the rest of the family eats. So some basics for healthy eating, going back to these again, and this is a lot of repetition, but some important points. Try and get rid of the liquid calories. Again, it's not about counting calories when you have kids. I don't think, I've never counted calories for kids, but you know, look at what the calorie content is and then how much nutrition are we really getting out of this. And juice, soda, and whole milk after 2 years of age, those are just extra calories that your kid's not really benefiting from. Drive-through, it happens. You know, try and keep some go-to options at home so that you're not doing it more than you need to. And try to buy less processed foods, again, because the processing compromises the nutrition of the meal. If you're really ambitious, think about planting a garden. It's an excellent way for a toddler to explore nature and learn some of those math and science concepts as well. Or, you know, maybe grandma and grandpa have a garden for them to play in. Healthy eating, I think it's important to know that it's not easy and it takes time, and you don't have to do it all in one day. Just think about little changes that you can make one by one to try and do healthier eating in your home. They get easier the more you do it and the more you practice it, and no one's got this figured out 100%, so just keep trying. And everything that's not healthy in moderation. The reason pediatricians get all excited about this kind of stuff is the epidemic of obesity is out there and in our faces. Based off of, I think this is 2008 data, but 30% of kids are in the overweight category, 20% of preschoolers are in that category, and then more than overweight to the point of being obese, 17% of kids are qualifying as that diagnosis of obesity, and 10% of preschoolers. This little graphic that I threw in there, I don't know how helpful it is, but you know, the risk of adult obesity increases the older the child themselves is overweight. So if you have a 1-year-old that's overweight, he has about a 15% chance of being obese as an adult. And that just increases with time. So, you know, if your adolescent is overweight, the chances are not good. So that's why we, you know, these habits are cumulative, and so you want to start off on the right foot so you're not chasing your tail later on. A lot easier to prevent obesity than to go back. So, and obesity does have a lot of adult consequences that we're seeing in kids. So type 2 diabetes, I've read one statistic that there's a 10-fold increase in this diagnosis in kids over the last 2 decades. High blood pressure, we're seeing teenagers with high blood pressure, high cholesterol. We're seeing 8-year-olds with these kinds of things. Earlier puberty is a consequence of higher weight. I mean, it's not a given, but it happens. Kids that are overweight demonstrate lower self-esteem, increased risk of depression. We see more teenagers with liver disease and gallstones that they might not have otherwise had. Sleep apnea, breathing problems. It's a lot harder to control asthma if a child's overweight. And there's an increased risk of different kind of bone diseases and injuries. So there's consequences to a child carrying too much weight. This 5210 rule was developed to modify lifestyle changes for obese kids, but it's really rules that we promote for everybody. And so it's a good rule of thumb for every day. So every day you try and get 5 fruits and vegetables. Every day you try and do 2 hours or less of screen time. If you have children less than 2, they really ideally are not getting any screen time. And then an hour of physical activity. People kind of laugh at this for toddlers because they're active all day long, but the playing hard kind of physical activity. And then ideally no sugary beverages like the juice and the soda. So final tips. Generally, I think kids will eat whatever they need to. They'll get all their nutrition as long as you're offering a variety to them and not going to the things that you know that they're going to eat every night. Offer good healthy options as much as you can. And the donuts and ice cream and cookies and candy will find its way in. Just keep all that in moderation. Any diet things that you do, try and do healthy eating across the board, that everybody's kind of held to the same expectations. And if your kid is a picky eater or mealtime is a problem for your family, just relax, try not to make things too much of a deal. Chances are you're doing just fine. And we'll open it up for any questions that anyone might have. Anybody? Yeah.
Won't stop eating on their own, like as far as portion control.
Yeah.
He's been like that from day one.
Yeah. I have a child like that myself, and so I feel like maybe this talk was easier for me because my son will eat anything you put in front of him. As a parent, I personally kind of use my own judgment and make sure that they're drinking fluids to go with it, and then kind of just prepare them that this is going to be the end kind of thing. And stick 2 or 3 meals a day, 1 or 2 snacks in there. Chances are, it's something to talk to or touch base with your doctor, make sure that they're on the growth curve and doing fine. If it's, every day, they just don't know when to stop kind of thing. But sometimes they're just going to have a bigger appetite and it's going to wax and wane a little bit too.
So my doctor had kind of recommended, he never did whole milk.
Okay. Yeah.
2% and then 1 hour joint skim.
Yeah. So sorry for those of you at home. The first question was about the kid that doesn't want to stop eating. The second question is about how I feel about skim milk. And a doctor may tell you to try skim milk if your kid's weight is trending on the higher side. And so if they're over 1, it's totally fine to do skim milk if that's the situation you're in. But so that's why we do those healthy checkups and, plot your child, and then we can kind of gauge you on what's the best milk option for your kid.
When you showed that graph earlier, what is considered to be obese for age 1? My son just turned 1, and he had a lot of catching up to do because I developed preeclampsia. Anyways, so he's at 22 pounds, but what is considered like obese for a 1-year-old? Right.
So the question is, what's considered for obese for a 1-year-old? So your doctor can help you decide where your child falls with that. So at every checkup, up until 2 years of age, what we use is a weight to length ratio. And so that's why we measure both those things and we look at them. And then it's a percentile. Your child is, those things are plotted against every other kid that age and that gender, so boy or girl. And so the cutoff is if you're above the 85th percentile, you're considered overweight. And then when the child's over 2, we start plotting a BMI, a body mass index, which is just a little math equation using height and weight. For kids, it's a percentile thing as well. So it's how they plot compared to other kids in that same gender, same age range. And again, if they're over the 85th percentile, overweight, over the 95th percentile, technically obese. As a parent, you don't have to get fixated on that, but it's good to check with your doctor where your kid's plotting at their visits to see what the trend is.
My son's going to be 19 months this weekend, and he weighs like 23 pounds. He's like the 17th percentile. I don't know what to do about that. He can still fit in 9-month clothes. Yeah. It's kind of ridiculous.
So the question is, Mom says that she has a 19-month-old son who is the 17th percentile. and if that's a problem. And it really generally isn't. So every kid is, I mean, there's going to be kids that are on the low and there's going to be kids on the high. And the real question is the overall trend. Sometimes your doctor might kind of ask, you know, did you start out small, or how big's dad, or something like that, to kind of get a gauge of if this is appropriate growth. But if your kid follows the curve from visit to visit, chances are you're doing just fine. So again, try a variety of foods. And if nutrition is a concern, then that's something for sure to talk to your doctor and make sure that you're troubleshooting the right areas. Other questions?
We're two grandmas here, trying our best. Clam chowder. I have a 1-year-old granddaughter. She loves clam chowder, but I don't give it to her anymore because her father has developed a later life allergy to shellfish. Do you see a correlation between babies and one of the parents?
Yes, there is a little bit more risk. So chances are if she did fine with clam chowder, you probably didn't need to take it out. So the question was, can they give their 1-year-old clam chowder even though dad has a food allergy? And so the rules out there are kind of in flux. There's high allergy foods that we have seen maybe there is a benefit if your child is already at risk for allergy to avoid until a certain age. But if the child's not already at risk, then you can probably introduce things as you might otherwise. It's probably something worth talking to your personal doctor about, because they know your history and what they're comfortable with, because the rules are somewhat changing out there. But that is a real correlation, that if dad has a food allergy, it does increase the risk of the child having a food allergy. Maybe not the same one, but in general a food allergy.
Hi there. I'm asking some questions from our live chat with Mama Ha online. The first question: what's the difference between organic vegetables and the ones just in the regular produce section at the grocery store? And after that, is there a difference between fresh and frozen?
Right. So, so the first question about organic versus non-organic, nutritionally, they're probably not significant enough difference to get excited about. There is, you know, the idea of less pesticides and exposure that way. As a pediatrician, I don't think you have to break your bank account to buy organic. It's kind of your own personal decision how much you think that's worth it, because the evidence and the research out there isn't overwhelming enough to really say one way versus the next. The second part of the question, as far as frozen versus fresh, fresh is probably more ideal, but frozen is a good alternative, and I would prefer frozen over canned, because canned tends to have sodium and other things added in to help preserve it. So fresh is probably second to, or frozen is probably second to fresh.
Okay. Our next question: mom allows her 2.5-year-old to have a little bit of her protein shake, maybe a 1/4 cup or so. Is that okay? Is it dangerous?
My guess is not, but not knowing the specifics of the protein shake or where the stuff comes from, I can't say conclusively. There's a lot of places out there and online that might be marketing something that I'd be a little more hesitant about, but chances are it's probably okay. Just can't say concretely based off of what she's putting in it.
Okay. And at what age should a parent start transitioning out and reducing the amount of milk?
So I think 1 year of age is really the time to be doing that. So I have a 11-month-old that's turning 1 next month, and so I'm thinking about this all the time. But so really the trend, you know, most kids, you know, when they're babies, need about 24 ounces of formula anyway a day, and so if they trend no more than that by 1 year of age, you're okay. But I'd probably slowly get down to like 16 to 20 after a year of age. And I think one thing that I didn't say but I meant to was the bottle. So a bottle is sometimes the hook, line, and sinker for the milk. So if you're struggling to get down on your milk, get rid of the bottle, and maybe more so get rid of the bottle after a year of age. And kids lose interest in the milk lots of times if it's in a sippy cup rather than the bottle.
do you have any suggestions? My daughter is like stuck on hot dogs and mac and cheese, and that's all she'll eat. And at dinner time, I'll try, different things, and I get I can't eat that, or I don't want that. Or it's a fight, like at dinner time and stuff. And but I'm afraid she's gonna starve.
Right.
So.
Well, I think that is so common, and so don't get overly frustrated, and don't feel like every meal has to be a tug of war. And it goes back to the prepare what you think she should eat, and don't let her fill up on the mac and cheese. So, this is how much mac and cheese you get. You can have some pears, and you can have this as well. And if you're still hungry and you ate all your mac and cheese, try something else. So just slip in the variety little by little, and don't let her fill up on the bad stuff, because and it's always good to touch base with your pediatrician, make sure that your kid is plotting okay, that you don't need to be worried, but chances are you don't. So yeah, slow changes. I mean, once you're stuck, it feels like you're stuck, but little by little.
Did you have to give volumes on the grains, like how much cereal a day or bread?
I didn't. You can go to the FDA, myplate.gov is the website, and it will tell you based off of your child. I personally, as a parent, don't get too worked up about it, because I really feel like grains are everywhere. I mean, your kid has a cracker, a piece of bread, they usually are doing just fine. So it's not something that I get too worked up about. The biggest thing is trying to do healthier grains rather than white bread kind of thing. Other questions?
A whey protein shake that she buys locally in the store, like the mix. Sorry.
Yeah, again, my guess is that a small amount's okay. It's probably not the necessary habit to get into, and I'd probably try and do like just a straight up fruit smoothie that she's maybe going to even like more, rather than adding her extra protein, because she's, there's lots of ways to find protein. I'd probably try and get it into the food rather than into a shake.
Suggestions for like easy on the go types of snacks?
Yes. Well, I think that's the never-ending question. So staple for my family is raisins and Cheerios, plain Cheerios. There's lots of things out there. Dried fruit, there's lots of good dried fruit out there. There's some, and Cheerios doesn't have a lot of nutrition, but it seems to appease a kid, and it doesn't have a lot of sugar, so I'm fine with that. But there's other good cereal options out there. But I think I would probably go with dried fruits and cereals that are my default as a parent myself. But then, like applesauce things, stuff like that. I have heard of parents kind of getting stuck on those squeezy fruit in a little squeezy bag, and I wouldn't use them as your default every single day, because sometimes people get stuck in those. Other questions?
If the child is like transitioning at like a little over 12 months to milk, from bottle to cup, not so keen on the milk, and not using juice, so water is fine, and just enough that she's got good wet diapers. Does that sound fine?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, the kid is not so keen on things other than milk and things not in the bottle at the 1 year transition. So, if juice in a sippy cup isn't the end of the world, if you need a little motivation to at least try the sippy cup. My kids I have 2 kids, and they've been totally different on it. One refused the sippy cup to the nth degree, and the other one just latched onto it. So every kid's going to be different, and you might find little tricks that work better for you. But I wouldn't use juice as a daily thing, but sometimes it's enough to entice them to try that sippy cup a little bit more. But yeah, water is great. And if your kid has their 2 glasses of milk a day and the rest is water, that's perfect to me. So, did that answer the question? Okay. Anything else? Well, if more questions arise, I think you can get contact information from me, but also your pediatrician, I'm sure, is happy to answer any questions. And one more.
One more.
Sorry. Sure. No.
Well, my daughter, she'll be 10 months at the end of the month, but when I start putting regular food, she doesn't have any teeth yet. So what is like some good suggestions? Because I had problems with she's now 2.5. She wouldn't break off a baby food till she was like 20 months old, but she didn't get her teeth till later, which is now the same thing with my youngest.
Yeah. So the question is about getting some more table food into the diet for a 10-month-old without teeth. So if it's something that you can easily mash between your fingers and your kid is demonstrating those mashing motions with their jaw, it's generally safe. There's little hand mashers that you can get, and just find whatever you're making as your meal, mash it up and try it that way so that she gets used to the other flavors other than baby food, because there's a lot more flavor in table food generally than baby food. And little by little, overcooked carrots and stuff like that are good little finger foods to start trying.
Just one more. Developmentally, where do you think is a good time to really go from them hand feeding themselves or you feeding them to trying to let them use a spoon or a fork?
Yeah. So the question is, developmentally, when are kids ready for spoon and fork versus getting fed themselves? So, around 9 months of age, plus or minus, kids are going to start wanting those puffs. And I think that's the role of puffs, in my opinion, is starting to learn those skills. Not really that they need to learn how to feed themselves, but just learn those skills. And then 12 months of age, it's good to start letting them play with the spoon while you're feeding them with the spoon. And if there's some foods that they feed themselves and then you feed the rest of the meal, it's kind of a mix of the two. And then I would say 18 months to 2 years of age, they're going to start wanting to feed themselves and do it all on their own. And my 3-year-old, we're trying to enforce the utensils now. So it's a slow process. But anything else? Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks.